All right, welcome back for another deep dive. And this time well, you know where we are.
Back in the Inferno.
Back in the Inferno, picking up right where we left off. That's right. Um, Last time, things were getting, well, kind of gloomy, right? I mean, we were in limbo. Not a bad place, all things considered, but definitely not a party.
Not a lot of laughs.
Not a lot of laughs in limbo. But we left Dante at the edge of the River Acheron, remember?
And he does Canto 5.
Canto 5. Buckle up, everybody, because things are about to get intense.
The mood shifts dramatically right from the first line, Dante says. Thus I descended out of the first circle down to the second, which girds a smaller space, but holds a greater punishment that goads to wailing.
Whoa, okay, so right away we know it's not going to be like limbo.
Not at all. Smaller space, but way more suffering. We're not dealing with intellectual despair anymore. This is visceral, raw.
And what is it that's causing all this suffering? What's the sin we're dealing with here in the second circle?
Lust.
Oh, man. It's like we suddenly switched genres, right? Philosophical drama to, like, a soap opera.
It's a fascinating shift, and it tells us something important about how Dante views sin. In Limbo, those souls were punished for inaction, for failing to commit. But here, in the second circle, it's the opposite.
They're being punished for what they did do.
Exactly. Their actions, their inability to control their desires.
Oh, okay. I'm starting to see the connection.
Good. And that connection becomes even clearer when Dante describes entering the second circle, a violent, raging whirlwind.
Talk about a change of scenery from that quiet, almost peaceful limbo to a raging storm.
It's brilliant, really, because the whirlwind is the perfect symbol for lust.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, think about it. How does lust work? It sweeps you off your feet, right? Consumes you, leaves you completely disoriented, just like a storm.
Wow, you're right. It's that contrapasso thing again, isn't it?
Exactly. Dante wants us not just to understand, but to feel the punishment, to experience the chaos, the lack of control.
To get swept away.
Yes. And who better to illustrate that feeling than, well, you know who's coming.
The most famous couple in literature, maybe?
Paolo and Francesca. Their story has been told and retold for centuries.
And it still packs a punch. But before we get into the specifics, I'm curious, why Paolo and Francesca? Of all the historical figures Dante could have chosen to represent lust, why them?
It's a great question, and I think it shows us why Dante is such a master storyteller. He could have just given us abstract concepts of sin and punishment, but instead, he gives us characters, stories that we connect with.
Humanizes the whole thing.
Exactly, and Paolo and Francesca's story is particularly powerful because it's about more than just physical lust, right? It's about the way passion can cloud our judgment, lead us to do things we never thought we would.
Like falling in love with your brother's wife.
It does tend to complicate things, and it adds a layer of, well, transgression. It's a reminder that lust can have consequences that ripple outward, hurting others beyond those directly involved.
Happening in the middle of a raging whirlwind. It's just so much imagery, so much drama. But I'm sensing a connection here to Dante himself, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
I think you're onto something. Remember, Dante isn't just observing this scene. He's deeply moved by it. In fact,
He faints.
he faints. After hearing Paolo and Francesca's story, why such a strong reaction?
Maybe because he sees something of himself in their story. I mean, Dante was known for being a pretty passionate guy himself, right?
Exactly. And don't forget, he's writing the Inferno in exile, forced to wander after being banished from Florence. Maybe he feels a bit like he's caught in a whirlwind of his own making, just like these souls.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful image. So it's not just about lust. It's about recognizing the potential for that kind of destructive passion within himself.
Precisely. Dante's not just judging these souls, he's confronting his own capacity for darkness.
And using the Inferno to explore those fears. It's like therapy, but with more demons.
Exactly.
But wait. There's more. I mean, we haven't even talked about all the other figures Dante sees in this circle. Dido, Cleopatra, Helen of Troy.
It's like a who's who of history's greatest lovers.
And they're all caught in the same whirlwind. What's Dante saying there? That no one is immune to lust, no matter how powerful or famous.
I think so. It's a reminder that this is a universal struggle. And it's not just limited to romantic love, either.
Oh, right. He even mentions Achilles, the great warrior, undone by love and grief.
Exactly. So it's about desire, yes. It's also about the way our passions can control us if we let them.
Which brings us back to Dante's message. It's not about denying our passions altogether. It's about finding balance.
Yeah. Balance, reason, virtue. Those are the things that keep us grounded, that prevent us from getting swept away by the whirlwind.
So we've got the whirlwind imagery, the tragic love story, Dante's own connection to it all. But there's one thing we haven't really talked about yet. The book, the story of Lancelot and Guinevere that Paolo and Francesca were reading when, well,
The spark that ignited the flame.
exactly. So is Dante saying that art itself can be dangerous, that stories can lead us astray?
Now that's a question that deserves its own deep dive.
Maybe we'll save that for next time, because there's still so much more to unpack here in Canto 5.
You know, it's amazing how much Dante packs into this one canto. We've got the epic scale of hell, these really personal stories, and then this whole question about art and its influence. It's kind of overwhelming.
I know, right? It makes you wonder what he was really going for. Like, was he genuinely worried about art being a bad influence? Or is it more about how we use it, how we interpret it?
That's a good point. And I think it ties into Dante's own situation, you know? Writing the Inferno while he's in exile, accused of using his words to stir up trouble. He knew firsthand how powerful language can be, how it can be used for good or for evil.
So there's this whole other layer to the story. He's not just writing about sin, he's thinking about his own role as a poet. Like, can art actually lead us down the wrong path? Can it blind us to what's right?
Yeah, I think he's wrestling with that idea. And the fact that he brings up the book that sparked Paolo and Francesca's passion. Well, it makes you think, right?
It's like he's saying, look, art can be dangerous if it's misused, but it can also be a force for good. It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. And it comes back to that idea of choice, of taking responsibility for our actions, whether it's giving in to lust, misinterpreting a text, or letting our emotions take over. Dante's warning us to be careful, to think about the consequences.
And that's a message that still resonates today, don't you think? I mean, we're surrounded by stories, images, all these things designed to appeal to our desires to distract us.
Totally. It's like Dante speaking to us across the centuries saying, hey, don't get lost in the whirlwind of it all.
So it's not just a medieval poem about hell. It's about the human condition, about the choices we make.
The power of stories, for better or for worse.
Okay, so we've talked about the symbolism, the characters, Dante's own struggles. But there's one detail that keeps bugging me.
What's that?
Dante faints after hearing Paolo and Francesca's story. I mean, he doesn't just get teary-eyed, he passes out. What's up with that?
Yeah, it's a pretty intense reaction. It's more than just being moved by their story. It's like he's deeply disturbed by it on a visceral level.
Like he's seeing something terrifying.
Right, and I think what terrifies him is the recognition that he could be them, that he has that same capacity for sin within himself.
Wait, really? But isn't Dante supposed to be the good guy here? The righteous pilgrim guided by God? Why would he be so scared of falling into lust?
Well, remember, he's writing the Inferno to confront his own sins, his own flaws. He's not pretending to be a saint. He's showing us his struggles, his fears, and in a way, inviting us to face our own.
So he's not preaching from some high horse. He's down in the trenches with us, wrestling with these same questions about desire, temptation, and what it all means.
And that makes him more relatable, don't you think? More human.
Definitely. It makes you wonder about forgiveness, about redemption. Even Dante, with God on his side, can be tempted like that. What hope is there for the rest of us?
Big questions, right. And that's what makes the Inferno so powerful. It doesn't give easy answers. It makes you think, makes you feel.
Makes you question everything.
Maybe that's the point. But, you know, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I think we need to take a closer look at that fainting scene. What exactly triggers it? And what does it tell us about Dante's state of mind at this point in his journey? And it's even more interesting when you remember that this isn't the first time Dante's fainted in the Inferno.
Oh, that's right. Back in Canto 3 when he first met those beasts in the dark wood.
Exactly. He was overwhelmed, paralyzed by fear.
So it's not just the story itself that gets to him. There's something deeper going on.
Right. Something about this particular encounter triggers a primal fear.
And you think that fear is connected to, well, sin. To Dante's own awareness of his capacity for sin.
I do. Dante's not just an observer here. He's a participant. He's on his own journey, confronting his own darkness.
Okay, but how does that explain the fainting? It still seems like a big jump.
Think about it this way. Dante, even with divine guidance, is still human. He's susceptible to temptation, to making wrong choices. And in Paolo and Francesca, he sees a reflection of his own potential for sin.
Like he's looking in a mirror, but it's distorted, twisted. He sees himself giving in to passion, ending up just like them, condemned.
Exactly. It's a terrifying realization. No wonder he faints.
He faints out of pity, too. For them, for their suffering.
He recognizes their humanity, even as he acknowledges the gravity of their sin.
So it's not simple judgment. It's pity, fear, maybe even a little bit of identification with them. Like, there but for the grace of God.
Exactly. And that complexity, that willingness to wrestle with these difficult emotions, it's what makes the Inferno so powerful.
That's definitely not your typical fire and brimstone sermon. It makes you think, makes you feel.
And when Dante wakes up from his faint, he's changed. He's not just observing anymore. He's actively participating in his journey through hell. And that's what great literature does, isn't it? It challenges us, makes us confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
It's been a pretty amazing deep dive, wouldn't you say?
I think so. We've covered so much. The whirlwind imagery, Paolo and Francesca, Dante's own struggles, the power of art, sin, and redemption.
A lot to process. But I feel like I understand Canto 5 and Dante on a whole new level now.
And as you keep reading, keep these things in mind. Pay attention to the symbolism, the characters, the way Dante connects it all back to his own life. And don't be afraid to make those connections to your own life, too.
And to everyone listening, don't let the Inferno intimidate you. It's a challenging work, but it's also incredibly rewarding. Let it challenge you, ask questions, and maybe even change you a little bit along the way.
You might even find yourself recognizing your own whirlwind moments.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Dante's Inferno. We'll be back soon to explore more of the fascinating world of classic literature. See you next time.